Are off and running, and we are so thankful for all of you being here today. And we ask the Lord's blessing on our time of Bible study with Him. And our background today, again, is from my niece Kelly. Beautiful picture of Lake Mendocino in Northern California. And I'm Pastor Dave Cuyers, Country Bible Church here in Boonville. And we are still working on our study of the book of Genesis. We're 2/3 of the way through now, over 2/3. And thank you, Morgan, for your service. And I will try to get this on YouTube, and we thank the Lord for our YouTube channel. So we're going to look at Genesis 34 through 36, and that's just some of the topics that we'll look at today a little bit. But last time we looked at Genesis 32 and 33. Envy and greed were the way I started out, because that was a lot of what Jacob had to flee from. His brother-in-laws were going to kill him, it looked like. We looked at Jabbok River and Peniel, the topic of no one has ever seen God at any time. We saw another huge description of the angel of the Lord as infinite deity, and a number of other things that we looked at. So if you would, open your Bibles to chapter 34 of Genesis, and we're going to look at the first 24 verses. And I will put them up on the screen, and we will read them together, if you would. Rise if you want to. If not, don't bother. But now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. When Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. He was deeply attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the girl and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young girl for a wife." Now Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah his daughter, but his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob kept silent until they came in. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. Now the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it, and men were grieved, and they were very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter. For such a thing ought not be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give him to her in marriage. Intermarry with us, give us your daughters and to us, and take your daughters to yourselves. Thus we shall live with us, and the land shall be open before you. Live and trade in it, and acquire property in it." And Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "If I find favor in your sight, then I will give whatever you say to me. Ask me ever so much bridal payment and gift, and I will give accounting as you say to me. But give me the girl in marriage." So Jacob's sons answered Shechem and his father Hamor with deceit, because he had defiled Dinah his sister. They said to them, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition will we consent to you, if you will become like us, in that every male of you be circumcised." Verse 16, "Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take our daughters for ourselves, and we will live with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us to be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and go." Now their words seemed reasonable to Hamor and Shechem and Hamor's son. The young man did not delay to do the thing, because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Now he was more respected than all the household of his father. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of the city, saying, "These men are friendly with us, therefore let them live in the land and trade in it. For behold, the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them. Only in this condition will men consent to live with us to become one people, that every male among us be circumcised as we were circumcised. Will not their livestock and their property and all their animals be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will live with us. All who went out of the gate of the city listened to Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out from the gate of the city. Thank you, folks. I should have left in the slides from last week on greed and envy. It's a major factor here with this rape. Throw in lust. Lust is a form of envy. Greed is right in there also. They're all the same side of the different sides of the same coin. And their greed for their livestock and their let us take their daughters in marriage and give our daughters to them. Will not their livestock and their property and all their animals be ours? Can you see the greed that's sneaking in here again? Throw in lust, which is just another form of envy and greed. And so the consequences for this are devastating, as we're going to see. One of at least two miserable chapters in the Holy Scriptures. And I left out chapter 38, which is not much better. But no, I'm not being irreverent, but accurate. Okay? I hope you'll agree with that by the time we get done today. Chapter 34 and chapter 35. 3 sons of Jacob will forfeit the right of the firstborn through these two chapters. All 3 sons are the sons of Leah. But first we'll see the sordid ordeal of concerning Dinah, the daughter of Leah. Many believe that there would have been other daughters of Jacob, but only Dinah is mentioned because she has this important part in this. The whole chapter is taken up with the love for her and her beauty and her rape and her revenge over it and all that. So last time we finished with 33:18, and Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, on his way to Padam Aram, and he camped before the city. Okay? So back in 31:3, the Lord Jehovah said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers. But he just gets to Shechem and he builds sukkahs. He starts building barns and houses. And he doesn't complete the task. Partial obedience to God is disobedience. That's a recurring theme all through scriptures. God says something, you don't just get to do a little part of it. Partial obedience is disobedience. And here he's headed in the right direction, but then he gets off on a rabbit trail and he goes toward Shechem instead of going down to where his fathers were. But this is the city of Shechem now. Modern city around it. I couldn't research it, but I believe this section right in the middle is the ancient ruins of the old city, and they've just built around it. So he said, go home, which is down here. He told Esau he'd go to Seir, which is down here in Jordan, east of the Dead Sea. Where'd he go? He went to Shechem. So God says go southwest. He tells his brother he's going to go southeast. And where does he go? Shechem, Succoth. So we've got a deceiver, conniver, manipulator, and who's still obviously working on his own flesh. Why do I bring this up? The consequences of his disobedience to God, or his partial obedience to God, is manifest. He gave up flocks and herds. He gave up 3 sons being the rights of the firstborn, and he gave up his wife dies in this chapter also. All bad news. So, not obeying God is a sin. It's popular now to try to take the sting out of sin. J. Vernon McGee says, if you remove the S from sin, it's the in thing to do. Also notice that the I is still in the middle of sin. Lo siento, I know these word plays don't come in Spanish, but in the Spanish it's S-I-N in English. So this is the sacred standing stone at Shechem. I'm going to show you where it comes up. So this is that other picture I showed you with the modern city coming right up against the ancient ruins. And this is their standing stone that they had. The city of Shechem, the name of it, it means shoulder. probably because the city was built mainly on the slope or shoulder of Mount Ebal. That's from Thomas Nelson's. Some scholars say it means saddleback. A saddleback is curved in two directions, and it's always a place of decision. Nobody stays in a saddleback. You either go up or you go down. But it's, saddles are curved this way and they're curved that way. Two curves on a saddleback. And so they're always a place of transition. When you get to the saddleback, you're going to be changing elevations. So this is another picture of it, and this is the two mountains here. That Joshua stood on one and said, choose this day whom you'll serve. But it's a modern city. You can go there now and visit it. Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. These two mountains overlook the ancient city of Shechem, where Joseph's bones were buried. And it's also Joshua 24:32, where he called this, choose, and they divided the camp. Those that didn't want to follow the Lord went on one mountain, and those that did follow the Lord went on the other mountain with Joshua. The east gate of ancient Shechem, the one through which Abram probably entered. Okay? So this is ruins that we find, and I've seen them all over Israel, of ancient gates. They're very important because of the shape of them and the size of them and the way they worked. Gate that tells. It's like if I told you that we've changed the lock to a combination front door lock, you would go, okay, well, or if you were an archaeologist 100 years from now, you dug up the bones of this church building and you saw there was a combination lock on it, you would go, oh, that had to have been in the 20th or 21st century or later. We've obsoleted those now. Now we have voice-activated ones that work by facial recognition. Or you would say, no, it didn't have a slage or a quick setch, which would have put it in the 20th century. If it had just a deadbolt, you would have said it probably precedes the 20th century. So same thing with these. These are key factors, these foundation stones of them, the way they enter in, whether they had seating out here for the elders of the city or not. This would be the equivalent of City Hall, or in our case, the county recorders. If you want to have an official recorded document of a real estate transaction or something, you'd come sit on these pile of stones, call witnesses together, and conduct business there. But the way that the horses could go through, or the blocks that they had for defending the gate, the way that, whether they were narrow so chariots couldn't go through, some of them have 90-degree turns in them, so you can't get through with wagons, and on and on and on. A lot of technology in their gates. Ancient walls of Shechem with Mount Gerizim in the background and the new township in between. So you got the high-rise buildings, you got the ancient wall. We're going to see another picture of this pretty soon. Oh, then we got a photograph of Dinah being drug off the horse or off the camel. When Shechem, verse 2, when Shechem the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he took her and lay with her by force. So this is a rape. He's deeply in love with her and he wants to marry her. He wants to make it right, but nonetheless, he had intercourse with her by force. So Dinah descended from a long line of women that history and the Bible describe as very beautiful. I think it's safe to assume that she was probably as beautiful as her grandmother or Rebecca or any of the rest of them. Now Shechem sees Dinah and apparently falls immediately, deeply, and lustfully in love with her. And he will pay the price for this. They're going to circumcise him, and then shortly, immediately after that, on the third day, slit him to death. And my dear old dad used to say, 2 wrongs don't make a right. He would also say, it takes 2 to tango. but 2 wrongs don't make a right. So their slaughtering the city is a worse sin than the rape of Dinah. Another picture of the ancient city of Shechem. So, and again, we don't know. This is probably a marketplace, and the standing pillars that are left from there. Don't think these old cultures were primitive or crude. All of these kinds of stones, they would have been covered with white plaster. They would have had gold trim. They would have been beautiful cities in their own right. They were designed to have heating and cooling. Most of them had water and running water and toilets and on and on. They were modern cities, a lot of them that I've investigated. So this is the ancient city of Shechem. And I'm going to blow it up for you, but this is the lay of the land. This is that wall, and this is the standing stone. So there's that large standing stone. This is the tower temple. Here's the eastern gate, or the gate that we looked at earlier. You can see how it would be. This is the Cyclopean wall that you saw in that other picture. So ancient, and it's called a tel balata in Hebrew. So compassion for Dinah. Verse 7. Now the sons of Jacob came in from the field where they heard it, and the men were grieved, and they were very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done. So my question is, were they angry because they'd had compassion for Dinah, or that they'd been insulted as the sons of Israel? Or both? I'd say it's probably both. I'm sure they loved their sister, this little young baby girl in their family. I'm sure they had a lot of compassion and love for her. But revenge and pride, and anger is usually based on pride. I say servants must set aside pride. Okay? We are servants of the Lord Jesus Christ. We are his ambassadors. And we need to guard very, very carefully against anger or gula. No, we don't. For almost always for us, when we have anger, it's sin. Now, there are occasions, if I heard a baby screaming out there and I went out and someone was torturing a child out in the street out there, what would happen to me? My face would flush, I'd be red, I'd be angry, I'd run out and stop the abuse of that child, right? How I did that and what I did after I stopped it, that would probably be sinful. And revenge kicks in and a lot of other stuff. So there is a righteous anger. When Jesus cleared the temple, it was a righteous anger that Jesus had. It was a bueno or gulo when Jesus cleared the temple. And he can do it without sinning. We have a very tough time having righteous anger and not sinning as a follow-up. Bible says a lot about it. Proverbs 11:2. When pride comes, then comes dishonor. With the humble is wisdom. Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling. 29:23. A man's pride will bring him low, but a humble spirit will obtain honor. Ephesians 4:26. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. So do you see this distinction here? You can be angry. Anger is not a sin. It's what we do with the anger that's a sin. So we're commanded, be angry, natural reaction, protecting people. There's lots of times when anger is correct. But do not sin when you're in anger. It's a fine line. We got to be careful with it. But they want to become one people. Verse 22. Only on this condition will the men consent to live with us to become one people. Separation from the nations is going to be a recurring theme from here on out. There's whole books of the Bible about the separation that Israel should have. Ezra 10:11. Ezra commanded, now therefore make confession to the Jehovah, God of our fathers, and do his will, and separate yourself from the peoples of this land and from their foreign wives. So God gave some very strict rules to the Israelites to maintain them as a separate people, his holy priests on planet Earth, to reach the lost in their timeline. And so he commanded that they would be separate from them. That's what the whole Levitical law is about, is a separation of Israel from the world, and to make it obvious to everybody that they were distinct and separate. Let me read the next few verses, 25 to 31. Verse 25. Now it came about on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of Jacob's sons, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took their sword and came upon the city unaware, and killed every male. They killed Hamor with his son Shechem with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went forth. Jacob's sons came upon the city and looted the city, because they had defiled their city. They took their flocks and their herds and their donkeys, and that which was in the city and that which was in the field. So let me add here, we always put the blame of this on Simeon and Levi. But what did the other brothers do? They came upon the city and looted the city. They got a hand in this. If somebody commits a felony and all they're doing is driving the car, but somebody is killed in it, the car driver gets blamed with the murder. He goes to jail with the rest of them. So, and our law is based on Bible law. So they're as guilty as the two brothers. The two brothers lost their right to the firstborn position. Verse 29, and they captured and looted all their wealth and all of their little ones and their wives, even all that was in their houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble on me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites, and my men being few in number, they will gather together against me and attack me, and I will be destroyed, I and my household. But they said, should we treat our sister as a harlot? So, and they caught a photo of this one also. Slaughtering the city. Look at all the dead bodies out there. Wiping them out completely. Verse 25, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took a sword and came upon the city unaware and killed every male. Simeon and Levi slayed the Shechemites, is the title of this painting. Jacob failed in his rebuke. Okay, it's crucial how we raise up our children. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me by making me odious among the inhabitants of the land. Do you see anything in there about the horror that they committed, or the wrong that's done, or the sin against God to wipe out a family over one guy that wanted to marry a girl and took her too soon? They just murdered a whole town, and he's only worried about himself and his reputation and the consequences of the sin. Proverbs 29:15, the rod and the reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. And that's what's happened here. Jacob did not punish his sons the way he should have. Instead, they run. 22:15, folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. 23:13, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with a rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. My oldest grandson used to say about the saying, spare the rod and spoil the child. He says it's actually 2 commandments. And I had to look this up in the Bible to see if there was a Bible verse that was even close, and there's not. It's the phrase, spare the rod and spoil the child, is not a Christian phrase, and it's not in the Bible. The phrase actually comes from a narrative poem written in the 1600s titled Hudibras by Samuel Butler. Okay. Chapter 35, Jacob's vision and God's promise. I'm going to read the first 8 verses. Then God said to Jacob, arise, go up to Bethel and live there, and make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. Let me read that again, it's important. Make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. Verse 2, so Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Put away the foreign gods which are among you. Purify yourselves. Change your garments. Let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone. So they gave to Jacob all the foreign gods which they had, and the rings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was near Shechem. Verse 5. As they sojourned, there was a great terror upon the cities which were around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. He built an altar there and called the place El Bethel, because God had revealed himself to him when he fled from his brother. Now, Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel under the oak. It is named Alon Bakuth. So, lots going on in that little passage there. 35 verse 1 on page 59 of the New Schofield's Study Bible says, it's the first revival recorded in the Bible. It then lists 10 common aspects of biblical revivals. So I thought it was interesting that he saw this as the first revival. Some think that Jacob got saved here at this point, finally, because from here on out, nothing's bad spoken of him. Seems like he cleans up his act. Number one, according to Dr. Ryrie, or Schofield, number one, preceded by gross iniquity. We saw that. And making me a stench in verse 30 of chapter 34. Number two, initiated by a word from God. Then God said to Jacob. Number three, forsaking sin in the world. Get rid of the foreign gods. Purify yourselves. So those are the first three indications that are requirements for a revival. Number four, obedience to God. Get up. Let us go to Bethel. Set up a stone pillar. Number five, remember the past blessings. God who answered me in my distress. Number six, divine protection. The terror of God fell upon the towns all around them, and they didn't pursue them, even though Jacob was worried about it. Number seven, new revelation. God appeared to him again. God said to him. Number eight, God renews promises. A nation from you and kings, the land I gave to Abraham, Isaac, I will also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you. And number nine, a coming test, Genesis 35:19. So Rachel died. The matriarch of the 12 tribes died. And number 10, an offering of blood sacrifices, verse 14 of 35. Jacob set up a stone pillar. So Dr. Schofield sees these 10 prerequisites, if you would, for revival. Lots of people crying all over America for revival. I don't see any of them endorsing these 10 prerequisites for revival. That's what's required according to the Bible, or what the pattern is. But he says, put away the foreign gods which are among you. I say it looks like Jacob knew about Rachel's theft by this time. He obviously didn't know about it when Laban was chasing him, but by now he must know that she has him. The discoveries at Nuzi and Mari in Iraq shed light on this gods or Elohim issues. Household gods were highly important in Nuzi. In court, the family idols could be proof of being in error. Rachel's theft was a serious crime, chapter 31, verse 22 through 37. So those are some of the important points about these little teraphim, little images. They go from anywhere from the size of a dime up to life-size images, idols. So there are idols to foreign deities. So, and a lot of them are made out of gold and silver and precious metals, which raises up the issue. What did Jacob say to do with them? Get rid of them, bury them under that tree. He didn't say melt them down into gold and silver bars. We'll use them later. He said, no, get rid of them. And they buried them. Jacob finally obeys God, 35 verse 6. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. 31:3, he was told, then the Lord Jehovah said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers. Okay? Which is down almost in the Negev down there. 30 years lost by his stealing the blessing. He's been gone a long time. He gave away much herds by not believing the prophecy that the older would serve the younger. He insisted his brother take all that wealth. He lost his daughter by going to Shechem instead of Canaan. Disobeying God also always costs a lot. And his partial obedience is sin. Partial obedience is non-obedience. When God says stuff, we have to do it the way he says when he says it. Was it the place that impressed Jacob? What is it about Bethel? 28:16 through 17. When Jacob awoke from his sleep, remember the ladder, staircase to heaven? He thought, surely the Lord is in this place. How awesome is this place? This is none other than El Bethel, the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Now, it's the God of this place rather than the place itself. So he's worshiping this place almost rather than the God of the place. 35 verse 7, then he built an altar and called the place El Bethel. No longer just Bethel, house of God, but now it's the God or God, the God. El Bethel means God of Bethlehem, says the NIV note. So let me read from verse 9 to 15. Genesis 35:9. Then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. God said to him, your name is Jacob. You will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. Thus he called him Israel. God also said to him, I am God Almighty. I think that's the first use of that. It's a profound name, El Shaddai. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come forth from you. Verse 12. The land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your descendants after you. Verse 13. Then God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him. Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he had spoken with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured oil on it. So Jacob named the place where God had spoken to him Bethel. So you remember back in chapter 32, verse 24, Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. You remember that? And we talked about the picture has a picture of somebody with wings, not a man, but an angel. And there are no angels with 2 wings. There's only angels with 4 wings or 6 wings. 4 wings, they're cherubim. 6 wings, they're seraphim. So, 32 verse 28. Then the man who said, your name will no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome. He just prevailed against God in the flesh in a wrestling match. Verse 35, verse 10. God said to him, your name is Jacob, and you will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. So he named him Israel. Have you ever heard anywhere in the Bible, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel? No. Israel is the only name change that vacillates back and forth. And there's actually more places in the Bible where he's called Jacob than where he's called Israel. The word Israel is used thousands of times, but the man is oftentimes called the God of Jacob. Okay? So it's a very interesting thing here. Everybody else, when they get their name changed, if God changes somebody's name from Saul to Paul, it never goes back. From Petra to Simon Peter, never goes back to being Petra again. Sarai becomes Sarah. She never goes back to Sarai again. When God changes their name, it's permanent. Interesting wrinkle with Jacob and Israel here. just as equally interesting to me is that God does it twice. And he recites this, God says this in chapter 35 with almost the same words as he did in chapter 32. God's repeating himself in a different way here. But one factor I wanted you to check, 32 verse 28, it's the man who changes his name. Verse 35 verse 10, God said to him. So who changed Jacob's name? A man or God? Both, right? Or was it the angel of the Lord, who is both God and man? I think it's the angel of the Lord, the messenger of Yahweh, Jesus Christ, before the incarnation. So, Jacob, but Israel. Not Jacob anymore, but Israel, it says. Strong's number 3290, Yaakov. We looked at this before. Jacob says he's a heel holder or heel catcher, meaning trip somebody up, or a supplanter, or put yourself in the place of, a deceiver, and so on. Lots of it on here. I had no longer heel catcher, supplanter, or deceiver, or trickster, but now God's saying you're no longer to be called a supplanter or deceiver, but now you're to be called Israel. Strong number 3478, meaning Israel. God prevails. Okay? So it used to be you were a deceiver, and now you're acknowledging that God prevails against you. Just talking about the wrestling match? I don't think so. God's been prevailing over Israel for 3,500 years. He's still struggling with them. But now, Israel, God prevails. Jacob is finally obedient at this point in chapter 35. Israel, it's their land forever, verse 12. Land which I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your descendants after you. No mention of the Palestinian state in here. They didn't come out in the scene until last century. And they were named after the Philistines. 135 AD, the Roman Caesar came and wiped out Jerusalem for the second time. 70 AD, destroyed it. Left a few Jews behind. 135, Roman emperor came and destroyed it so completely, he literally plowed the city streets of Jerusalem. They hauled them all off. They left nobody behind. And he named the land, Roman name, Palestinia. And so he did it because he didn't want it called after the name of Jacob and Israel anymore. So the enemies of God's people called the land Palestine. And for that, from 135 AD to present, most of the secular world calls it Palestine. We're not going to go into a study on that right now. It's another whole topic. God went up from him, verse 13. Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked with him. I was just curious about this. Sounds like it was a face-to-face encounter he had with him again. Reminds me of the ascension of the Lord. Could it be the angel of the Lord ascended from him, just like Jesus did in Acts chapter 1? Second person of the Trinity, because we have these verses in the New Testament, John 14:7. If you had known me, Jesus says, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you have known him and have seen him. John 6:46. Not that anyone has seen the Father except the one who is from God. He has seen the Father. Or John 1:18. No one has seen God at any time. But if you've seen Jesus, you've seen God. Okay? If you've seen the angel of the Lord, you've seen God. If you saw any of the Old Testament appearances in the Old Testament, you've seen God. And it was the second person of the Trinity, the incarnate Word of God, the eternal Son of God. Judges 13:22. We are doomed to die. he said to his wife, "We have seen God." John 1:18, no one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known, or revealed him. 1 John 4:12, no one has ever seen God, but if we love one another, God lives in us, and his love is made complete in us. So when you love strangers, when you do Christ's work, you are a reflection of Jesus Christ. And they're seeing God. And God lives in us. So, we come across here in verse 14, the first mention of a drink offering. Look at how many times drink offerings come up in Numbers, where we get the law, the Levitical law. Only one time is it ever mentioned, the first time here in our verse, in verse 14 of chapter 35. But I thought it was interesting, we've got two references by Paul to it in the New Testament. It's not a Levitical offering, Leviticus chapters 1 through 7. Drink offerings are always poured out, they're never drunk. Numbers 15:7, wine as a drink offering, offered as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Psalm 22:14, Messiah is a messianic psalm. I am poured out like water. Isaiah 53:12, because he, the Messiah, poured out his life unto death. Philippians 2:17, but even if I am being poured out like a drink offering, Paul says, or in 2 Timothy 4:6, I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time has come for my departure. You want to know a very important prayer to pray once in a while? Offer yourself to the Lord as a drink offering. Every minute, every second, every hour, every day, every year of your life should be poured out as a drink offering. All your time, treasures, and talents, all your gold, oro, all of it should be an offering to the Lord. And I'm going to read verse 16 to 29 now. Verse 16, then they journeyed from Bethel, where there was still some distance, to go to Ephrath. Rachel began to give birth, and she suffered severe labor. When she was in severe labor, the midwife said to her, do not fear, for now you have another son. It came about as her soul was departing, for she died, that she named him Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. Okay? This is kind of an interesting, I didn't do a slide for her. Her soul was departing is what the Bible calls her death. You are a soul who happens to have a body for a very short period of time. You are a soul and you happen to have a body until you lose that body either at death or at the rapture, whichever comes first. But the real you is a soul. And we see that here in the Old Testament. Her soul was departing. It's a euphemism. It means she died. So they put it in parentheses, for she died. In case you don't know what it means, her soul was departing. But she gives him a name because of her grief. And the father says, no, he should become son of my right hand, Benjamin. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Verse 20, Jacob set up a pillar over her grave. That is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. Still there. Verse 21, then Israel journeyed on and pitched his tent beyond the tower of Eder. It came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now there were 12 sons of Jacob, the sons of Leah, Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, then Simeon and Levi and Judah, then two later, Issachar and Zebulun. Verse 24, the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. Verse 25, the sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maid, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maid, Gad and Asher. These are the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. Verse 27, Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre of Kirath Abba, that is Hebron, where Abram and Isaac had sojourned. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last and died, and was scattered to his people, an old man of ripe age, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him. So we got a painting of it, of the death of Rachel from 1847 by Gustav Fernando Metz. Neat old painting. So, 35:18, she named her son Ben-Oni, but his father named him Ben-Hamin. NIV notes say Ben-Oni means son of my trouble. And Benjamin means son of my right hand. Why is that important? I hope to show you. Christ is clearly the son of my trouble or suffering. Luke 23:34-35. Simeon blessed him and said to Mary, his mother, this child is destined to cause the falling and rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be spoken against, so that the thoughts of many hearts will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your soul too, your own soul too. So Christ is clearly the son of my right hand. Acts 2:3-4. The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet. 36. Therefore let all Israel be assured of this. God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. So what he's quoting here is Psalm 110, verse 1. It is the most quoted Old Testament verse in the New Testament. And it's applying to the Son as sitting at the right hand of the Father. So this name of Benjamin and Ben-Oni, I think, should make you think of Jesus Christ. We also come across the first mention of Bethlehem, which is defined as the house of bread. John 6:35. Then Jesus declared, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty. So Jesus is tying himself to this idea of the place of his birth. Bethlehem, the house of God, the house of bread. Okay? Easton's Bible Dictionary says, Bethlehem means the modern name of Bethlehem, i.e. the house of flesh. It's also 5 miles south of Jerusalem, standing at an elevation of about 2,500 feet above sea level, thus 100 feet higher than Jerusalem. It's also the place where we had the slaughter of the innocents in Matthew 2:16. I thought it was interesting. There's no mention of any ministry that goes on in Bethlehem. It's the place of our Lord's birth, but it's not one that Paul went to minister in, or Jesus ministered in. Then we find this incest, if you would, first instance of incest, I believe. One of at least 2 miserable chapters in the Holy Scriptures, 35 verse 22. It came about while Israel was dwelling in that land that Reuben went in and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Now there were 12 sons of Jacob. So we're about to get the 12 sons of Jacob by their birth order. Remember we talked about this? There's dozens of ways that the Holy Spirit lists the 12 tribes of Israel, whether it's by birth order, by rank, by ministry, by whatever. There's a lot of them. So the first miserable chapter was the wholesale slaughter of all the men in Shechem and the carrying away their wives and children and all their plunder. But now we find patriarchal incest. Jacob's first 3 sons are all disqualified. Judah becomes the default high priest. So we celebrate the Lion of the tribe of Judah, who's in the firstborn position. The high priest of the family was in the firstborn position. And Judah becomes elevated to the firstborn position because of this defilement that we see in chapter 35. But he had 12 sons. The first mentioned the use of a complete list of all 12 sons. The one we had before didn't include Benjamin because he wasn't born yet. My question is, where's he from in Manasseh? You won't find him in that list. So we have the 12 sons that were born to the 4 wives. You have 13 tribes usually are listed, and there's 14 names of vocabulary to make up the 12 tribes that are listed. Okay? So you got a vocabulary of 14 names. From that, the Holy Spirit picks and chooses to come up with the 12 that he wants. So Genesis 48, verse 12, now then, your 2 sons born to you in Egypt, speaking to Joseph, before I came to you here, will be reckoned as mine, Jacob says. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine. Equal status. Adopted sons, we get a lot of our adoption laws from the Bible. Equal status under the law as an adopted son. Joseph gets a double blessing, but Judah gets the right of the firstborn. Make the distinction between the right of the firstborn and the double blessing. So, Israel had 12 sons by 4 different wives. So Zilpah had Gad and Asher, Bilhah had Dan and Naphtali, Rachel had Joseph and Benjamin only, and Joseph got the birthright promise. We're just about to launch into the story of Joseph, and we'll show you a lot about Joseph. The Bible has a lot about Joseph. And then Leah, we've just been studying them. She had Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, who gets the scepter promise. And then later on in life, she had Issachar and Zebulun. Dr. Eli, one of my Hebrew instructors from Israel, says, therefore, altogether 24 different lists of 12 tribes sped throughout the Hebrew scriptures. And he lists them all for you, in case you want to do a study of the 12 tribes. Notice it's never counted as 13 tribes. And there's a vocabulary of 14 names that are attributed to these listings of all the various tribes. So, chapter 36 is all about Esau, that is Edom. Okay? And we've looked at this before. Esau is Edom. That's kind of a Google satellite image of it. Interesting. Mount Seir is a mountainous region in Edom extending from the Dead Sea to the Electric Gulf, also known as the Gulf of Aqaba, the more eastern of the 2 arms of the Red Sea. So it's a huge area. We call it Jordan. Genesis 36 is completely about Esau, that is Edom. And we'll return here sometime when we want to study him. So we're not going to read the whole thing. You guys can mispronounce those names just as badly as I do, maybe even better. And so we're not going to read it all, but we're going to pick out a few verses. I'm going to start with verses 6 through 9. Genesis 36:6. Then Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters and all the household and his livestock and all his cattle and all his goods which he had acquired in the land of Canaan. Let me interrupt the text a minute. And that his brother Jacob gave him. The text goes on. Canaan, and went to another land away from his brother Jacob. Verse 7. For their property had become too great for them to live together. And the land where they sojourned could not sustain them because of their livestock. So Esau lived in the hill country of Seir. Esau is Edom. Then these then are the records of the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in the hill country of Seir. Okay, you remember from our previous chapters, the Hebrew word toledoth, that's the way to divide up the book of Genesis into 12 or 13 portions. It's a divinely way that the book is divided up. Strong's data for toledoth is number 410, means generations, and it's from 32:5. It's an account, a birth, a genealogical registration, genealogies, generations, or the order of their birth. Genealogical registration is used 12 times. That's why the NIV and a number of other translations translate it, the book of the records of, or words to that effect, describing that as a written record of the genealogy of that particular patriarch. So we've looked at this quite a bit before. We just finished up the Toledot of Isaac, and now in chapter 36 we get 2. We get the Toledot of Esau, And then we get his descendants, the Edomites, two different separate Toledos. We have one more to go that we'll pick up maybe even next week, which is chapter 37. We get the end of Jacob and the start of Joseph. 36 this is the account of, that is Edom. Esau and Edom are treated as synonyms. Generally, Esau is the man, Edom is the land. But they go back and forth. Usually, and the Bible does this with everybody. All the grandsons of Noah are listed like this. So if I say Gog and Magog or Togarmah or whatever, that's the grandson's name of Noah, and it's used to apply to the land. 25:39, once when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished, and he said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he's called Edom. Edom and Esau refer to the red soil there also. So he's a red-headed red man. The land that he takes over is red soil. And so they apply that to both of them. Verse 25, his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. Remember his mother wrapped goat skins on Jacob's hands to deceive Jacob because he's so hairy. NIV note says Esau means hairy. He also called Edom, which means red. And he asked for some of that Edom stuff, that red stuff. Sounds like Genesis 13, 5 through 9. When Lot went to Abraham, also he had flocks and herds and tents, and the land could not sustain them while dwelling together. For their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. So they said, "Please separate from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right," Father Abraham said. So it's almost the same kind of a separation going on here. And it's a willing separation. They're not being chased away. They're making a rational decision based on grass for the herds. Seir comes up in the dictionary, Harper's Bible Dictionary, as the mountainous region southeast of the land of Canaan inhabited by the Edomites. Why is this important? Herod was an Idumean. Okay? And he's described as an Edom. He was half Jew. He was an Idumean, an Edomite from Edom. And so that's why he was partly despised. That's why the Jews didn't like Herod. Vision of Obadiah. The whole one-page letter of Obadiah is dedicated to the same as chapter 36 of Genesis. The vision of Obadiah. This is what the sovereign Lord says about Edom, or Esau, you could say. This entire one-page book is about Esau and Edom. I'll give you a little hint. Obadiah 1:18. Then the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. But the house of Esau will be as stubble, and they will send them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau. For Jehovah Yahweh has spoken. How would you like to have that prophesied about California? Land of the fornicators, Californications. You know, how would you like it if God said that about our land? Were they any worse than what we have become in California? I doubt it. So, in closing, I love this picture. Looks like you should go off of it with a skateboard. Judith and I were blessed one day to go over Mountain House Road going over to the coast, and they've got some hills that look like this, and there were street lugers going down there. About 60 miles an hour they shoot down that mountain. We got down to the bottom, and CHP had set up a roadblock for them. Somebody had complained about it, I guess. That's out in the middle of nowhere, you know. So Lord bless you and keep you all safe as you travel this week. And I say shalom. Thank you, folks, for your attention. We're going to quit that, and we're going to quit this.